And like I was just taking a picture, and suddenly this like bullet hit the sand right next to me and kind of exploded. It was like, obviously, the first thing that goes through your head is like, shit, I'm being shot at here. So I kind of dived into this little cave, and it was bullets going off all over the cliff around me. And yeah, it was pretty terrifying in the moment.
My next guest is a survivalist and adventure consultant. She has done some incredible work over the years, working with TV stars like Bear Grylls on Man vs. the Wild, along with another host of stars. She has some incredible stories to tell on the podcast today, from working with rangers in Kenya to being shot at by tribesmen. And today on the podcast, we talk about her life growing up and how she got into this amazing line of work. So I am delighted to introduce Megan Hine to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Finally got back to you after months of ignoring your email.
Well, it's very kind, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. I'm really excited to sort of get into this because you're a survivalist, and you probably have so many stories to cover, and I'm sure we can't get quite through them all on the podcast. But for people listening who don't know you, probably the best place to start is at the beginning and how you became a sort of survivalist expert and the sort of growing up and what sort of how you got into it. So I'm basically a wilderness guide, a survivalist, and producer on some of the biggest adventure shows on TV, which basically means I get to look after the safety of high-profile individuals and film crews and make them look epic on TV, come up with the content for that. So it's quite a mixed bag really of what I do. I suppose, it's something that I've always done. Like I was very, very fortunate that all my family holidays when I was growing up were into the mountains. My dad was a geologist originally, so we spent a lot of time when I was a kid looking for fossils and heading into the mountains to go and like look at rocks and things, get up close and personal with them. So yeah, I had like an amazing childhood, really, kind of quite a feral. Every summer we'd be off for like weeks on end in this little caravan. I'm one of four, so it was like 6 of us in this tiny little caravan, having like adventures all over the UK. So I think I was very, very fortunate. I was very involved with like the military cadets as well, and through that I was able to get my hands on like loads and loads of adventurous training. So like winter climbing in Scotland, whitewater kayaking, all of these amazing experiences, which kind of really set me on my path to where I am today. Oh, amazing. So actually Bear Grylls is a complete drip and it's all you.
Well, I suppose my career is based on discretion, so to be quite diplomatic about these things. But I've been working with Bear actually for about 14 years now. I kind of fell into the TV side of things. I picked up quite a random array of qualifications and skills. So like my career originally was very much focused on the mountains. I was like absolutely obsessed with rock climbing and mountaineering and skiing and things. And that was where my focus of my career was on. And then I ended up doing an apprenticeship in bushcraft and survival. It just seemed like quite a cool thing to do. And I spent 3 years doing that and then sort of leading expeditions, like very much anthropological based expeditions. And suddenly I was going off to jungles and deserts and all of this. And this was in my like late teens, early 20s. And I was working with like some of the most amazing people, like jungle warfare specialists and mountain guides and all these absolutely incredible people, and kind of got this real random like sort of load of experience of kind of like stunt rigging through to like expedition leading through to kind of the medical side of things. And then at some point I got contacted. I was working for a bushcraft company, leading expeditions for them. And they'd just been asked to do the survival consultancy for the original Bear Grylls Man vs. Wild shows, and they wanted to build a team, and they needed somebody who could rig the stunts. So they invited me along to do that. And yeah, this was like 14 years ago now. And then I kind of stuck. And I think they realized, the TV production companies realized that it was actually cheaper to employ one person who could do like the survival and the rigging and looking after people, rather than employing one person for each job.
Amazing. So what I think so interesting is the sort of why and the sort of psychology, because you put yourself under enormous stresses in the wild, and especially you who's sort of well trained in it. How do you think sort of people adapt in those situations?
So this is a really fascinating question, and I've spent the past 20 years like looking after people in some pretty extreme remote wilderness environments, and I think we completely kind of underestimate the benefits and the effects of spending time in nature, and I think like the therapeutic benefits of spending time outside are absolutely massive. And this is just, this isn't necessarily going and climbing Everest, or going and surviving in the Amazon rainforest or wherever it is. It's like literally just going out into nature. But I think the extreme end of that is the effects that I've seen on the people that I've guided, because typically I tend to be in very remote and what could be considered quite extreme environments. And it's so powerful, like taking people into these environments and seeing, and I see it time and time again, like the hundreds, probably thousands of people that I've taken into these places. And I've literally at times dropped people into these environments and been dropped by myself as well, with very, very little with you. So like a knife and a machete, or, medical pack or something, just in case the shit hits the fan and things go downhill. And it's just incredible to see how people step up in those situations when the consequences are severe. It's amazing, like how strong and how resilient we really are. And I think this is something like resilience has been kind of thrown around at the moment. It's a word we hear a lot, and it sounds like quite a happy place and all of this stuff. But like resilience is doing whatever it takes to survive. And we are all resilient, like every single one of us. Our bodies are fighting for survival all the time. Every cell in our body is resilient. It wants to survive. We want to survive. And we put ourselves into these situations. And it's like really at these extremes, it's where I see people kind of step into their own or fall apart. And that's what I find incredibly fascinating, is like, what is the difference between those that don't just survive, but thrive under pressure and in these environments, and those that kind of fall apart. And often those that fall apart are those that society wouldn't expect to, and those that do really well and thrive are the ones that often, like women and children, for example, that society's kind of got used to assuming that are weaker emotionally. And it's just incredible seeing people come into their own. And I think like the power of adventure, the power of actually going and spending time in these environments and pushing yourself. And this is, I don't encourage people just to randomly go off and step out of their comfort zone. The way that I work, and this is the power of being on like a guided adventure or having somebody with you who knows what they're doing, is that you can step outside of your comfort zone within, for example, my comfort zone. So my comfort zone, because I've spent so much time in these environments, is going to be much bigger than the average person's comfort zone in that environment. So, within my comfort zone, they can step out of theirs. And it's incredibly empowering for that person. And it boosts confidence. It brings people together again as well, because I think there's so many things that we've lost in the way that we live today. And one of those being connection with other people. We live very isolated lives, and we've definitely seen that throughout the pandemic. Connection with the natural world, we've become so removed from that, and connection with ourselves. We've created all these incredible ways to kind of beat our priorities of survival, our basic human needs like nutrition, water, shelter, all of these things, like sleep as well, by creating screens, by creating stimulants. All of these things, we're absolutely amazing at being able to create these things to kind of beat our basic human needs. But by doing that, we've become quite disconnected. So going back into these places and really kind of stripping away like the modern trappings and going back to the very vulnerable human beings that we are underneath it all is incredibly powerful.
Where do you think sort of resilience is taught? Because I imagine some people listening to the podcast might think, oh, you're just born with it. But I sort of feel it's something that is very much easily sort of channeled over years of putting yourself into these harsh environments?
Yeah, so I think like resilience is something that we're all born with the potential for sure. Resilience tends to come with exposure to challenge and overcoming that challenge, which I think is why I'm an ambassador for the Scout organisation. And I think this is where what we've seen like with the Scouts coming out the back of lockdown and the pandemic is actually really fascinating, because they have a programme called Skills for Life, which is about encouraging young people to have as many different experiences and different challenges as possible in their lives, from learning skills with like music, from getting out there in the community and interacting, sports, adventure, all of these different ways that we can challenge ourselves when we're younger. It can also come from challenges such as traumatic experiences as well. But then, in that term, it's like we kind of almost have breaking points with those experiences as well. So when we experience traumatic trauma, we have to, there can be a breaking point there, which then, sometimes needs external help then to kind of be able to manage that, and then be able to use that experience as growth into kind of stepping back into resilience. But there are different traits that make up resilience, and I've been doing this a topic I'm really fascinated and doing a lot of research into at the moment. And there's various traits that make up resilience, and we may be operating with some of those traits being at a higher level than others. And I think when they're all in balance, that's when we kind of find harmony in our lives.
Do you think sort of fear as well has something to do with it in terms of resilience, of sort of pushing yourself forward? If you don't have the fear of what's ahead, you sort of are more managed in these sort of situations. It's more manageable, in these situations.
Yeah, fear is a fascinating topic, and it's a question. So a couple of years ago, and the past couple of years, I've supposed to be working on this project. It's been working with like anti-poaching rangers on this like a long-term. So they go and do sort of 6 months, train the trainer, if you like. Getting these anti-poaching units, sort of the rangers from these anti-poaching units across Africa, and training them up in various skills. One of those skills that started being implemented a couple of years ago was resilience training, and I went along with another guy to help out with that. And it was really fascinating taking people who are literally putting their lives on the line, often on a weekly basis. They're involved in firefights and things, and talking to them about fear and what fear is, and then learning to manage it, because fear is incredible. Like the way that I see it is, in our brains have kind of got two creatures that kind of live in there. You've got the human brain, which is logic and reasoning, and you've got like the animal brain in there as well, which is very primal. It's the limbic system. It's very primal. It's the hypothalamus, the amygdala, and it's incredibly powerful. It's like the oldest part of our brain, and its primary role is to keep us safe. So it's continually scanning the environment around us for any threats to us, and as soon as it spots any threat, however minor, it will trigger this flooding of chemicals and hormones through our system, which readies us for the fight, flight, freeze response, and the stress response that leads on from that. The human brain, however, is a much newer part of our brain, but it's much slower because it's so powerful. It takes a huge amount of energy to run it, so it takes quite a long time to kind of get that part of our brain switched on. Whereas, like, the animal part is the bit that snatches the wine bottle out of the air as it's falling down. Whereas before, the human brain has been like, oh, my wine, and gone for that. So it's much slower, but without fear and without that response triggering, like, we wouldn't survive very long as a species, or as individuals, because you wouldn't understand risk. So stepping out in front of a car, you wouldn't understand the danger, and you'd get squashed. So we need that fear, but then it's what we do with it when it's triggered is what counts. So it's like, how can you control that? So you've got a split second there to be able to get the human part of your brain re-engaged. And this is what we were doing with the rangers, is like we were using the perception of risk. So we were using height, with rock climbing techniques and via ferratas and things to trigger the fear response, and then get them to be able to see in themselves how it worked, how it was triggered, and then how to talk themselves back down again. And it's a really powerful tool for kind of exploring your own resilience and fear. And fear is a survival mechanism. It's absolutely amazing, but it shouldn't be controlling our lives.
Yeah, we sort of touched upon it very briefly earlier before the podcast started, but I sort of feel like our brains are sort of designed to make us lazy, designed to make us comfortable, and you have to sort of really force yourself out of it, because, you know, I don't know about you, but I always consider myself one of the laziest people. And I think that's because comfort is so easy, and so you're trying to sort of force it, and so you suddenly try and put yourself in difficult situations to sort of grow, to try and challenge yourself.
Yeah, so just going back there, like survival. So it's not laziness. It's like survival is all about conservation of energy. So it's like all animals. It doesn't matter whether it's an elephant, a human, a dog, cat, you know, whatever it is. It's all of our life is all about like conservation of energy, because when going back to our kind of cavewoman ancestors, which is kind of where our evolution sort of kind of slowed down a lot. For them, you know, food wasn't readily available, and energy sources weren't readily available. So everything, we evolved to not expend more energy than we're getting in. So over the winters, although we don't hibernate as such, we do have chemical releases and stuff in our brains and in our bodies to slow us down, so that we're not running around in a time which for our ancestors would have been very sparse, that kind of holds us in place. So, you know, the way I see it is like it's not laziness, it's conservation of energy. And I've seen this in myself when I've been dropped into situations where, you know, like just a knife or a machete for like weeks on end into jungles and deserts, to survive. It's like everything in you is trying to hold you still to conserve that energy. This is why like real survival shows are boring and like because people just want to sit and do nothing, because they're trying to conserve energy. But this is where that human part of the brain is so powerful, because in our everyday lives, because we've got all the resources we need on tap, we can override that with that human part of the brain and be like, yeah, okay, well, look, I have eaten, I have got my food here. I do need to go for a run now and actually burn some calories.
Yeah, it is so sort of fascinating. And also how years of evolution has sort of pushed us. It's like why we go into a restaurant and we always want to be facing out, because that's a human instinct that we like to sort of view our surroundings, because we don't want to have something jump from behind us. We always like to be against the wall looking out. Whereas, as you say, other animals are completely different. And, but yeah, sorry, going back to sort of the, working in Africa, did you have sort of hostile situations when you were training these, what do you call it? Not rangers. I was about to say poachers, but it's completely wrong word. Training these rangers.
Not on that one, no. So I didn't have any negative, because it was very. We had a lot of, because we were out in the bush on foot, so we are meeting elephant and like buffalo, which kind of nicknamed the Black Death, because they're actually one of the most dangerous creatures in the bush. They're angry creatures, so you're kind of having to look out for those all the time. But the very nature of the work that I do, because, well, since the age of 17, it's like I've kind of spent, 10, 11 months of each year away in these remote kind of wilderness places. By the very nature of the work that I do, they are inherently dangerous. And I have like run into various situations, like been shot at a few times and held hostage and all sorts of exciting things. Obviously, a huge part of the work that I do is to mitigate and to minimize the risk of any of this stuff happening. But when you're going into kind of politically unstable environments, or environment like with the environment, like exposure and weather and all of this kind of can play a part in it as well. So as much as I kind of try to mitigate, there's always something that happens. So, and this is something I always say to anybody who's wanted to get into kind of expeditions or, you know, to go off and travel and things a lot. I know that on social media, it looks like you've got these, you know, you're off on these incredible adventures. And, you know, I think social media can be a little bit misleading. And so none of the trips, or very, very few of the trips that I do, are just disappearing off into the wilderness with no prior preparation. Because it's, for me, all these trips, particularly because most of the trips and things that I do, I'm actually responsible for the lives of everybody else on that trip. So it's really, really important that I build like a safety net beneath the expedition, because just like life, like these expeditions never go fully to plan. And there's always something that happens that where you need to change plans, and having that safety net beneath you of communication with the outside world, of having evacuation plans for particularly like for the TV work I do. There's a lot of like risk, like the more boring part of my job is to write these very comprehensive risk assessments, which nobody ever flipping reads, but I have to do that anyway. So there's a lot of preparation that goes into all of these sort of remote trips, and I would advise that to anybody who's going, because so, you know, if you do in the frustrating event that you have to call out help, that somebody knows where you are and can actually find you. So yeah, anybody going off into these places, for sure, do the preparation and the research beforehand.
Yeah, I think we've had a few people on with Anna Blackwell, who got into a bit of difficulty in Sweden, and she had one of those sort of Garmin GPS trackers. So she just pulled it, and, you know, within a couple of hours, people are there. But, you know, if she didn't have that, she was stranded. And it's sort of very important with that to, yeah, as you say, be prepared, but also sort of adaptable, because I imagine in your line of work, probably there's a lot of conflict between, as you say, you're the health and safety inspector on these sort of trips, and there are people who are wanting to go bigger and wilder and sort of feel that they can do it, and you have to sort of rein it in.
Yeah, it's definitely, this is a big thing that I come into. So on the expedition front, then yeah, if I'm leading a trip somewhere, and sometimes like it can be like your sixth sense that's triggered. That's like I've got up in the morning and just been like, something feels off. Like I don't think we should be going for this summit, or I don't think we should be going further into the jungle, or, you know, wherever it is, whatever the trip is. And there's something inside me that's telling me that we shouldn't carry on, that we need to stop. And I've learned to listen to that. And it's really hard. It's so hard to quantify that to clients, particularly if clients are paid a hell of a lot of money to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And you telling them that they can't go and do something because of a hunch can be really difficult to manage their expectations. But I've learned over the years, I've learned to listen to that. And this kind of, again, goes back to that kind of evolution thing of like intuition. And the way that I see intuition is like, we've got this, so we've got our subconscious and we've got our conscious, and like 90%, maybe more, of cognitive function is happening in our subconscious. There's only a tiny little bit. It's like an iceberg. There's only a tiny little bit of conscious above this huge, vast iceberg. And the subconscious role is to protect the conscious mind from all the different stimulations that are coming in. So whenever I get that sixth sense, that kind of like anxiety and like feeling of like, shit, something's wrong, is I will stop and listen in, because what I figured is that often that anxiety and that sixth sense feeling comes from like an unformed image coming through. So my mind, my body, you know, the senses are picked up on something that's changed within the environment. And it sent me through like a picture of this, but it hasn't got the full picture and hasn't sent it all through. So I will stop and I'll listen to that and I'll really assess. And it's literally kept me alive and kept teams alive on quite a few occasions. So that's like the expedition side of things. In the filming side, because I work on like literally they are like the biggest adventure shows on TV, with huge budgets, with mega stars involved in them as well. And there's always the pressure to go bigger, to do bigger stunts, to do bigger challenges, to go further afield. And this is where my role can be quite difficult, because I'm involved in the creative. So I'm involved in like the story producing, so coming up with the journey. So I'll be the first person out on the ground, scouting for locations and putting together the journeys. But I'm also in charge of the safety on these shoots as well. And that's my number one priority. And it's like when I'm up against, huge networks, huge presenters, huge stars who want to go bigger, but it becomes dangerous and we can't manage it with the time constraints and the budget constraints. You have to get very good at you have to grow quite a thick skin, because when you're putting your foot down and saying no, it can be quite, you can get a lot of shit thrown at you and a lot of people hating you. But the way that over the years, I've come to trust myself and my judgment with these things, and it comes from experience. And in those situations, I will, if I have to say no on a film job, I'll always have a backup plan. So it'll be like, no, we can't go and do whatever ridiculous thing that you want to do. Because often these things have been kind of dreamed up in some office in LA where the people there have never actually been into these environments. So it's like, well, no, we can't actually do that, but we can do this instead and it will look epic.
So that certainly ticks the box and makes them happy. To some extent. You have to get because a lot of the producers, particularly from sort of America and things, it can be quite volatile, creative, very creative people who can be quite volatile and things. So I've kind of got quite good at having a thick skin, not take it personally. And once we start filming and they actually see it, that you'll be their best mate. So it's all good. They love it. I mean, you did sort of touch upon it earlier, but you sort of said you've been shot at, you've been held hostage. I mean, on these trips, have there been moments of trouble for you? I mean, it happens from time to time. I mean, some of it we keep relatively quiet because of the NDAs, because of people involved and all of this sort of stuff. But then there have been times, so we did a job in Mexico, probably about 10 years ago now. And we had several run-ins with drug cartels and things hunting us, because we were filming 4x4 show, a 4x4 survival show. It was really cool. It was 3 months out in Mexico, just doing some really cool stuff with these 4x4s. We were basically using some of the 4x4 routes that we were using were drug running routes, and we had a local fixer. So whenever we do these film jobs, we have local fixers, and the fixer's job is always to fix stuff, to make stuff happen for us, to get permits. They know the right people to talk to, the right people who need to be kind of paid off and all of this sort of stuff, and they help us and help keep us safe from those perspectives. But sometimes the message doesn't always filter through. So yes, we ended up being kind of hunted by drug cartels late one night. And I remember just hiding out in the bushes with all these guys with these semi-automatics, kind of getting out and looking for us in the bushes and stuff. It was quite exciting. And then Kenya, about 3 years ago, it was around the time when the big drought was happening, and we were out there filming some big show, and I'd been rigging, so we'd been building this kind of big rope bridge thing across a canyon, which had crocodiles and stuff in the bottom of, and I was just finishing off one side, and because we move so fast when we film, I always take little videos or take pictures, and I just finished rigging and I was just taking pictures of where all the rigging points were, so when we ran through the following day, it would be easily clip stuff in and things. And I was just taking a picture, and suddenly this bullet hit the sand right next to me and kind of exploded. It's obviously the first thing that goes through your head is shit, I'm being shot at here. So I kind of dived into this little cave,
and it was bullets going off all over the cliff around me, and yeah, it was pretty terrifying in the moment. But it's amazing, like in those situations, they kind of go into kind of a place of calm. So it's just them waiting, and it kind of, the firefight kind of swung around. I managed to get off, slide down into this river, like sort of chest deep with these crocodiles we've been watching popping up and down, kind of run through this river and up the other side, kind of this really steep rock, pretty sheer rock face, to get into like a bigger cave the other side where the two guys that I've been working with were. And we spent about 20 minutes in this cave with like bullets bouncing off the roof of the cave above us before we were able to, before it kind of died down a bit, and we were able to get off downriver and back to the Land Cruiser that we'd got parked off in the bushes. And it was just like moments like that, because we afterwards, you know, when we were kind of investigating what happened, it had got nothing to do with us. It was just that one tribe had stolen a load of goats from another tribe, and had tracked the tribe had tracked this other guys down and been following them, and the sort of firefight had broken out between them. And meanwhile, like a local ranger unit had set up an ambush. So it was like three parties, like all above where we were rigging, all shooting at each other.
Was that sort of up in the La Kipia area?
This was, well, it was, I can't remember what the name of it. It was near a big lodge. It's quite remote. I'm so bad with names. Don't
worry. Yeah, because that must have been sort of what, January, February 2017 time?
Yeah, it would have been. It was a few years ago now. Yeah. I can't remember. It's like, this is the thing about like being away all the time. It all kind of runs into one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I sort of know Kenya quite well, so I do remember that time.
Yeah, it was definitely like the whole area was like really unstable, and we had like a major star coming in the next day. And this is where I actually like the way that it was handled by the production company that I was working for at the time was really terrible, really, because it was like, let's keep all this under wraps. Otherwise, you know, this person isn't gonna turn up. And that was really hard, you know, when my role is like the safety of people. And yeah, it was definitely, it brought up a lot of questions in my head over, you know, like the value of human life and things, because, you know, there's obviously people who have lost their lives in this area, you know, the day before we're supposed to be filming there. And, you know, morally, how right is it that we're kind of carrying on with what we're doing and all of this sort of stuff. So yeah, that's the darker side, I think, of the film industry.
Yeah, I suppose, as you say, someone in a studio in the city doesn't quite get this sort of, you know, the jungle or the desert or the plains or something. So yeah, no.
There's also there's so much money tied up in all of these things, and it's so competitive now. I mean, we're at quite an exciting time with filmmaking, in that there's in terms of like the sort of the normal, like sort of standard channels and stuff are slowly kind of disappearing as we go more into kind of streaming platforms and things. So it's quite an exciting time in like the evolution of TV and how we watch it and what's going to be happening. But it's so competitive because all these different networks are all competing for content, for stars, for budgets, all of this sort of stuff, and like viewers and things, obviously. So it can be an incredibly ruthless industry to be a part of.
Yeah, it was quite interesting because, as you say, the sort of media, on the media angle, it is changing, and now, you know, everyone has a camera that can record for 20 minutes or so. They can make their own, they can upload it, and then they can be the star of their own TV program. And I think we had Benedict Allen on quite a few episodes back, and, you know, he was saying, you know, he used to go with his camera, record, which, you know, now everyone just associates with vlogging, but he was doing that way before anyone was sort of doing it on the sort of travel or YouTube per se. So no, as you say, it's a really sort of interesting time probably to be in media, as you say.
Yeah, I think give it a few years, because I think what we'll probably see now is in terms of like the streaming platforms and things, as they try to set themselves up and establish themselves, we're going to be making like a lot of shop window content, like big names, already recognized names, to draw viewers in. And then I think, once they become established, hopefully there'll be more budget then in like 2 or 3 years' time to then start bringing on new talent, start creating new content and new formats and things. Which so I think it's, we've got there's a bit of an evolution going on now, but it's like you said, it's like this is what's so exciting about like social media and like the access that we've got to people doing really cool stuff, because you can kind of tune in to whatever really and whatever your interests are. And so, like there's some amazing people making great adventure content and streaming it themselves on YouTube and their own platforms and things, which is great.
Yeah, no, I suppose your plan now is to carry on. I mean, the world's now opening up, so you've got sort of more media stuff coming in the coming months.
So there's been a lot of like shows that have been on hold through this period. It's been great for being able to been doing remote consultancy. I've also sold a couple of my own show ideas. So actually seeing those go into development and hopefully be made is very, very exciting. So hopefully in the next few months that those will actually get out on the ground, and I can oversee those projects being made, which would be super cool.
Are they local or around the world?
Oh, they're international. So one has gone to a US network and the other one has gone to a Korean network.
Oh, amazing. God, so you'll be spending a bit of time out in Korea, you hope?
I hope so, actually. Yeah. Though that one will actually probably be filmed. That'll be filmed around Asia, so that's not just Korea. So that'll be filmed all over. But the whole kind of pandemic, the whole lockdown period, kind of made me realize, I've spent so much of my life on the road, and it's been absolutely amazing. But then it makes me realize that there are this time actually kind of being in one place and actually, I suppose, like getting out and back doing stuff for myself, which is where, my love for the outdoors and my passion for what I do originally came from, and kind of going back into that, having this time has actually kind of made me realize that, that you also need time for yourself and time chasing your own passions as well. So that's, it's kind of the next chapter kind of involves more of my own adventures and picking and choosing more cleverly, like the projects that I'm involved with.
Do you do quite a lot of your own sort of expeditions, like for your own personal growth and development?
I used to. So that's how I first got into the outdoor industry. Originally was because I wanted to spend more time climbing and being outside for myself. And then, when I first started guiding, I was 17, 18 at the time. And I really didn't enjoy it. I was I had to go really slowly and I had to look after these people who would just complain and things. And I really didn't enjoy it. I was like, what am I doing? And then I realized, and it was on an expedition. I was leading an expedition out to Nepal, and I just realized that I had to change my mindset on this. And it wasn't about me. When I'm guiding, when I'm leading, it's not about me. It's about the people that are in my care. And so I have two personas. I've got my own self that when I'm in the mountains or when I'm out, it's for me, it's about pushing my own personal limits and seeing what I'm capable of. And then I've got my guiding persona, which is all about pushing other people and going on a journey with other people. And it's the most incredible thing, helping somebody achieve something that they didn't think that they were capable of, and accompanying them on this kind of roller coaster of emotions to get them to that literal and figurative summit of their mountain, or survival, or whatever it might be. And that's just, it's the most incredible thing being part of that journey. So very much two ways of interacting with the outdoors.
Yeah, I suppose, what was your sort of first big adventure when you started?
I think I was very, very fortunate that I ended up working for companies that I suppose were kind of cutting edge at the time of like taking people on these expeditions. So my very first expedition that I co-led with my boss at the time was to Namibia. And we went out and it was a 2-week long expedition with clients, but we had like 3 weeks, I think it was, before the clients arrived. And we went out and we spent 2 weeks with the Sam Bushmen. And we were working with them, kind of learning loads and loads from them. And then we went off for a week and would just put their skills into practice in the bush, in the Namibian bush there. And then when we had clients come out, we then went with several Bushman families out into pretty remote and just had like 2 weeks totally off grid, just living off the land with these Bushman families. So that was like that was the first expedition I did. And then I did a lot of work for World Challenge, for Adventure Works, which used to be like Jagged Globes, like youth expeditions and stuff. And kind of, I suppose, just built it up from there until I kind of got more involved with the TV side of things.
Yeah, because I think on this podcast, one of my big aims is always to try and encourage people to sort of get out and explore their limits. And by having someone like you on, who's done such incredible stuff over the years, hopefully it sort of encourages them to be like, oh, I can at least try and do that tiny thing that compared to what you're doing. And that's sort of one of the big aims of it. And, on so far, we've covered fear and why and just getting out and why, how your brain just tells you, right, don't do that.
No, I think in terms of like, for people wanting to get out, because what has been drawn to my attention recently, and this is like the guide and like the safety management side of me talking and thinking about it, is that what I see on social media and stuff is there's a lot of people going off on these adventures and on these challenges and things with very, very little prior training beforehand. Or not fully showing the fact that they're actually being guided, that they've actually got a guide with them, or that they've done all these training courses and stuff beforehand. So for anybody who's wanting to kind of get into adventure and go off into these remote amazing places, which I totally recommend, is to go and do training courses. There's like a whole industry of guides and leaders like myself who can take you and teach you the skills that you need for that expedition, whether it's a whitewater kayaking trip or if it's a survival trip or mountaineering trip. There's outdoor professionals in all fields, in all walks of adventure, and it won't break the bank to go and book yourself onto a course for a weekend, for a week. Learn the basic skills of like navigation, of wild camping, of like how to dress yourself in these environments. These are like the foundation or fundamental skills that so many people don't pick up and don't realize that they don't know until it's too late. Just go and get the training because it's like behind every single photo on social media, there's a whole backstory that you never see. So these pictures that people have taken in these beautiful remote environments, there's been like a whole series of events and training and things that have got somebody to that point where they can go and take that photo. So please do go and get training, because I'm based here in Snowdonia, and it's like chatting to the mountain rescue, and it's like they're out quite a lot at the moment just because people aren't equipped with the very basic knowledge of how to dress appropriately or how to navigate or just how to look after themselves in that environment. And it'll just set you up for a comfortable career in adventuring and exploring.
I think there was a thing the other day in the news about someone who got stuck up either Ben Nevis or up in the Snowdonia wearing sort of shorts and flip-flops or something, got caught short and the snow came in and they sort of rescued them with just like absolutely nothing on and could not understand. So
yeah, it's funny, but it's like, you know, I laugh and I still laugh now, like, you know, like laugh. But the thing is, it's like you don't know what you don't know until you're in that situation.
yeah,
And then
of course.
it's like, but this is where like going and doing the training beforehand kind of gives you some skills. But it's also like, I do think as well, we've got a lot of transferable skills as well from our walks of life. So it's like actually kind of really thinking through like what your actions are and what you're actually doing. It's like, yeah, it's maybe easier said than done, but
yeah, as you say, you know, it's something probably, you know, myself and you just take for granted that, you know, growing up and knowing this stuff or learning it from a young age, it's just almost second nature. But yeah, social media, which is, as you say, you always show the very sort of glamorous or very beautiful side to every photo, and don't show the sort of background and the story behind the photo. So yeah. Well, Megan, there's a part of the show where we ask the same 5 questions to each guest each week, with the first being, what gadget do you always take with you on your trips?
So I always take a satellite phone with me, or some means of communicating. I usually have a satellite phone and like an inReach or something with me as well. So I usually try to have like 2 methods of communicating with the outside world. Just because to look after myself, but also because, you know, I'm actually looking after other people in these environments, and it'd be irresponsible of me when that technology exists not to take it with me.
Yeah. What about your favorite adventure or travel book?
Does the Lord of the Rings count?
It does. We've had it a few times.
Yeah, well, it's just, I think because I work in adventure and because it's like reading, I mean, there's some people doing amazing things, writing some amazing books, but I actually really struggle to read adventure books just because it's like being at work and it's like I need the escape. So at least like if they're hobbits and stuff, it's a little bit different.
I mean, I think as we've always said, that was quite the adventure.
It was, but I think it's like it also like it makes you realize like what I always thought, because when I was a kid, when I first read it, I was just like, oh, I really want to be like one of these little hobbits off on an adventure. And then I was thinking about it like as an adult and thinking about it and be like, God, it'd be super shit to be like a hobbit, because it's like you've got everything is trying to kill you, and it's like you've got the fear like that they must be experiencing like the entire way round. I mean, I'm sure once they dropped this ring up in that volcano that they probably needed treatment for like PTSD or something. It must have been really traumatized.
Why are adventures important to you?
I guess it's more the question of why they wouldn't be. I think it's something that it's always been a huge part of my life from a very young age. Like it was a huge part of my childhood through to now. I guess it's who I am, and without being able to step out of my comfort zone to be able to push myself, it's like I get a real like anxiety. I also have ADD. Which is something that I've suspected for a long time, but it's sort of been diagnosed more recently. And it's like the inability to kind of sit still. So I think the work that I do is fantastic for me because my brain works at 1 million miles an hour. And with the work I do, it's like I'm over so many different things. It's like my brain can focus. Whereas outside of adventure, it's like, I couldn't just sit here in front of my computer like all day. So it's really important for my mental health as well as my physical health.
Oh, amazing. What is your favorite quote or motivational quote?
Yeah, so this is from Sucker Punch, the film, which I think is a really weird film and I didn't really get it, but it's the quote is, "You have all the weapons you need, now fight." And it's like, for me, that's what I remember, like when the shit hits the fan on a trip, it's like, I've got all the skills I need to deal with this. I may not have been in this exact situation before, but I've been in similar situations, or I can draw on experience from elsewhere and, you know, and I'm going to fight. I'm going to make this happen.
Oh, that's a really good one. I haven't heard that one yet.
There's a whole like poem thing. I've actually got it stuck on the wall here, like that kind of goes with it. It's amazing.
Amazing. And people listening are always keen to travel and go on these sort of grand adventures. What's the one thing you would recommend for people wanting to get started?
I think, like I said earlier in the interview, is to go and get some training in what you want to do. Like I said, there's like a whole industry of guides, instructors, leaders in whatever discipline that you're wanting to travel to do. And I cannot recommend it enough, going and booking yourself on with somebody who can help you push your limits and teach you a lot. And it doesn't, if you've got a group of you as well, it really doesn't cost very much to do that. And it will just set you up. And it means that the next adventure that you go on, you'll be able to do it with a lot more confidence, and it'll be a much more comfortable experience as well.
Oh, well, yeah, as I was reading that one, I was like, yeah, we have just got literally just before the 5 questions. Finally, what are you doing now, and how can people follow you in the future?
So at the moment, because we're just kind of coming out the end of the pandemic, I've been using this time. I'm actually kind of using the time at the moment. I'm away in September on another film job. And to that point, up until then, it's like I'm working on remotely, consulting for some shows. There's some pretty exciting new shows being made. So I'm doing remote consultancy for them, and I'm rebalancing body and mind, and actually, old injuries that kind of started niggling. I've actually had time now to kind of really kind of focus on like rebalancing and getting my energy level up as well, because when you're away for so much of the year and responsible for for multi-million-dollar shoots and people, I totally underestimated like the draining effect that has. So it's been really, really good, and I've hugely appreciated this time actually just being in one place, getting into a bit of routine to kind of rebalance like body, what that is, rebalance like body and mind, and actually kind of ready for the next chapter. And it's super exciting.
One thing we haven't touched on is you actually have an amazing book. If you've probably best you sort of tell the people, because we haven't actually sort of touched upon it, but it was sort of talking about your life and this sort of skills that you've sort of acquired.
Yeah, so Mind of a Survivor was a book I wrote a few years ago now, and basically came from the question of why are some people able to walk out of survival situations and others aren't, and like what are the traits that make up resilience and make that possible for somebody, mixed in with some of my own kind of stories from that time. So it's on Amazon.
Well, we'll leave a link in the description below.
Cheers. Yeah,
no worries. Well, Megan, it's been an absolute pleasure listening to your stories, and I cannot thank you enough for coming on today.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Well, that is it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you got something out of it. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next video.